Hello and welcome to Insight. I'm Laura Prendergast, and today we're going to delve into an issue that has been prevalent in Ireland for quite a while, but which is reaching a crisis point now. I'm speaking, of course, about the tragic circumstances that are reality for the growing number of homeless people and even families on the streets of Ireland. In 2016, the CSO states that there were 6,906 people listed as staying in temporary accommodation or sleeping rough, and since then, the problem has only worsened. In their latest recorded statistics, Focused Ireland have found that 8,587 are now listed as homeless, and of that number, 3,079 are under the age of 18. This is an appalling statistic and only highlights the need for change from our government. To gain some unique insight from the people on the ground trying to effect change and those who find themselves in this situation, I'll be joined by members from P.A.T.H, an organisation who distribute food and support to those in need. We will also be talking to a representative from Threshold, the national housing charity who are trying to prevent further homelessness. Plus, we find out firsthand the hardship homeless men and women in Ireland face, as well as speaking with members of the homeless community who will share with us their story. And we will also be meeting a very special person who's been directly involved with the homeless for many decades. But first, we take a look at one of these charities in action on the streets of Dublin.
We started 3 years ago, and we come up here on a Saturday night, every Saturday night. And you see yourself there how busy it is. You know, we try and do our best anyway.
Sandwiches, crisps, chocolate, men's toiletries, hats, scarves, ladies, underwear. Same for men's and women's.
For these people now, God knows what's happened to half the people in Dublin. You find a lot of them dead in doorways and stuff like that, you know. The thing is with the Dublin part of the city is there's no place to rent, and then even if you had rent money, they wouldn't accept you. Right? They won't accept social welfare, the landlords. You have to be working, you have to have qualifications, you know.
I used to ride break showing horses, that was my job for years. And the place closed down where I was working, that's how I actually became homeless. The place closed down and I had nowhere to go then after I was living on the site where I was working, and I had nowhere to go. I ended up on the streets up here then.
I'll tell you what I am now. I'll show you what I have here. Hold this for me. You'll never know who you'd meet in the street. I'm actually the best poet in Ireland at the moment. I'm on the road.
You're a poet?
The best part of my 2 books there.
Okay.
I'm on the road, and lads like me, but I'm on the street. But I'm selling in the street 20 years.
It's just kind of as bad as well, like, you know. Something goes missing wrong to someone, like the fingers pointed at everyone, and a big fight will break out then, like, you know.
I had a breakdown. I have a mental breakdown, and I was the psychiatrist diagnosed me with depression. Like, I knew the breakdown was coming. Planned it, went down for a few gargles one night. Instead of walking across the bridge of the Liffey, I jumped in the Liffey. Nobody cares, you know. I mean, the promises, all false promises. Huh?
Nobody cares.
No, nobody cares, except these people, like, people that we get food off. Yeah,
my father died in a tent. My father died. Like my mum and dad died. My father was in that doorway. Just them people that gave me tea and coffee, they were helping me to get cardboard and, you know, like plastic bags. Look, you know the way the shops throw out a lot of plastic bags? I was putting them all underneath him in this doorway, and I was crying, and he told me his feet was cold and he was afraid that his feet was going to be cut off. And I took off my stockings and I put them on him. And he was in Renla, he died from being homeless. And I don't want to die being homeless, you know, I just want a home. All I want is a home, and it's hard.
joined in studio now by Mark Farrell, Chairman of P.A.T.H Action to Homelessness, and Tony Murphy, who himself experienced homelessness. Thank you both for joining me today.
Thanks, Laura.
So Mark, let's start with yourself and talk a little bit about P.A.T.H, the organisation you chair. We saw on the video there some of the people that you meet and what you do, so if you want to tell us a bit about this.
3 years ago, Laura, we started up P.A.T.H Action to Homelessness, and I suppose from then, for the want of a better word, we've come from strength to strength as a group, but not only as a group, but with the people that we feed and the people that we share our time with. We've got to know them so much. We've got to know them first and second name terms. We've got to know even what down to the food they like. Some people are vegetarian. Some people take 2 sugars in their tea. Some people don't want a ham sandwich. So we know all that then about these people. So it's great that we know what they want before they come up to us. A lot of people on the streets, they can feel like they can be institutionalised. People call them a statistic. And I don't like that word, statistic. They're human beings like us all at the end of the day. I was just saying before we come on, you can imagine being on Grafton Street for 8 hours a day and you have 10, 15, 20,000 people walking by you and they completely ignore you.
Yeah.
You're a statistic. You're not
it's
a
very
statistic.
isolating and make you think that is it you then or...
Yeah, you don't know whether it's you or not, so we get down to their level. We don't look down, it's very intimidating looking down on somebody. We get down to their level, we share our time with them, we have a chat with them, see what they've done last week, see what they've done today. They're going to tell you the same story every week. They're going to be the same thing day in, day out. They've nowhere to go. They've nowhere
listen to them, and offer them
basically, that's it. So, we've come on, we're feeding up to 150 people every single week.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's very rewarding though.
Yeah.
I love going home at night time knowing that we've done our best. That's all we can do, it's all anybody can do.
Yeah, brilliant. And we saw some really disturbing images there in the clip, especially Eileen's harrowing story. Is that commonplace, do you think, in your experience?
Yeah, it can be common. There's a lot of people are afraid to live in the streets. There's a lot of people afraid to live in hostels.
Yeah.
You go into a hostel, some people will say, the homeless robbed the homeless. It's the same in the streets.
Okay.
We had one guy, took his shoes off, put them beside him at the end of him, at his feet, woke up the next morning, they were gone. Somebody robbed his shoes. So he had no shoes for the day. So yeah, it's very hard for somebody to go into a hostel, whether there's somebody on drink or drugs, or whether they're trying to come clean off drink and drugs. It's tempting for them when they go into the hostel. Then will they go back on the drink? Will they go back on drugs? But there's a lot of a mental health issue there as well that it affects a lot of people.
Yes.
And all these people need to do is talk.
Yeah.
That's all anybody needs to do.
Talk to each other and I guess work together and try and...
Yeah, if we all work together, nobody has to do a lot. That's the way we look at it, you know.
That's a good way to look at it. And you mentioned the alcohol and drugs there. I think many people are under the impression that a lot of homeless men and women are on alcohol and drugs. Do you think that is the case? Is that in your experience?
Yeah, there would be a lot of people on alcohol and drugs, and to be honest with you, I don't blame them personally for being on alcohol and drugs. And the reason I don't blame them is because you're trying to bed down all night and you're constantly thinking, your mind's thinking, what am I going to do tomorrow? Who's going to feed me tomorrow? Where am I going to go tomorrow? Is anyone going to talk to me tomorrow? So it's a quick fix for them to get through that night. It's like Tony was saying earlier, it's like a trap door. When you come to that trap door and you fall through that trap door, you're at the end. And unfortunately, that's what it can be like, whether it be on the streets or whether it be in a hostel. And it's very tough for these people. So no, I don't blame people for being on drink and drugs because it keeps them going.
That's all they have, kind of, nearly, in a sense.
Yeah, that's it. That's it.
And with regards to what we're doing, do you think on a national level we're doing enough, or what more could be done?
You look at Christmas time, the government opened up an awful lot of beds then for homeless people, and there was still some homeless people on the streets. And it's back to what I said again. Some people are afraid to go into hostels because of the drink, because of the drugs, and because of maybe they mightn't want to see a confrontation if there was one due to the effects of drink and drugs. So there'd be a lot of people on the streets then. So I think if we can do it at Christmas time, why can't we do it throughout the year the whole time, you know?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's a very good point, I must say. So Mark, you spoke to us about some of the things you witnessed in your work with P.A.T.H. And Tony, you yourself were on the other side of things for some time. Can you?
Unfortunately, yeah.
Would you share a little bit with us?
Look, it's Mark pretty much hit things on the head. It's about drink and drugs, but it's all of these things fall under the guise of mental illness. It's that before it's anything else, and that's what needs to be addressed. You know, there's all sorts of it. You hear of depression, anxiety. Most people suffer with a mild form of all of these things, but if you cross the Rubicon and you get to the stages where you become addicted, you become alcoholic, you suffer with depression, you suffer with anxiety, you're being moved along. It's not that you're being moved along. You're not capable of taking care of yourself anymore. You know, and we need people to take care of us. That's what I found out before I could make any difference for myself. And yeah, it's a pretty sad place to be. It's a pretty sad place to be.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. And you yourself were living in a hostel for some time. It's the Mount Offaly House.
Mount Offaly House, yeah. I was very blessed to get the courage, I suppose, in the first place to go and ask for some place to sleep. And on the night that I did, it was a Christmas Eve. The hostel was full, and I realise now that every hostel in the country would have been full on Christmas Eve, but on that particular night, I thought it was me, which I would have thought about an awful lot anyway. But yeah, I re-asked about 4 weeks later, and they let me in, and there I got plenty of time to think about how life had been, and I got great help from Roddy, who was there, and he'd be a spiritual guy, and he gave me some direction in certain things, and it didn't happen instantly. Didn't happen instantly. We had to fall through that trapdoor again a few times. But eventually we did something. I did something about it, you know.
Yeah.
And I haven't been homeless now for years.
Brilliant.
7 or 8 years, well, 9 years maybe.
And it wasn't just a roof over your head that he offered. It was support.
We needed somebody to talk to.
Yeah.
We need somebody to talk to. And I heard a guy just yesterday, you know, when people are telling you you're no good, you can't do this and you can't do that, we believe it. We also believe if we're told that, God, that's okay, you're doing okay, you're doing okay. And I found with Roddy, he had a great ability to tell you that you were doing okay. And that was a great start. You know, he'd help you down in the kitchen, you cook food for others, and you start to mingle with people. And it all helps. It's great stuff.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you both so much for
No
coming in
problem.
today. It was a pleasure to have you.
Thanks a million, Laura.
So join us after the break. Join us after the break when I will be joined in studio by a representative of Threshold, an organisation working tirelessly to secure right to housing in Ireland, and we find out firsthand what it's like to spend the night on the street. Welcome back to Insight. In September of 2017, the Right to Housing Bill was defeated in the Dáil. The bill, had it passed, would have recognised at a constitutional level the right to secure affordable housing in Ireland. The bill has been referred to the Finance Committee, but many of its supporters have been rather vocal in questioning why. I'm joined now by John Mark McCafferty, CEO of Threshold, Ireland's national housing charity. So John Mark, thanks a million for coming in to us today. So the right to housing in Ireland is something that was voted on at a constitutional convention back in 2014. Why has the response from government been so laboured in acting on this vote, do you think?
I guess it's laboured because it's a difficult question to answer. And the right to housing means different things to different people, different parties. Even different countries interpret that very, very differently. Also, it's might be necessary, but it's not enough. You need the resources. You need the resources in terms of political will, both nationally and locally. You need the kind of finances in order to pay for and plan for housing.
Yes.
And you need a planning system that is flexible enough and responsive enough and resourced that enables you to build houses for people across the life cycle, families, single adult households, older people. Where the housing isn't too far away from people's work or people's places of study or schools, that interact with other services and green spaces and transport links. And all of these things, I guess, we've not got right in Ireland. So there's a big, I guess, a big challenge there, both in terms of the resources, both the financial resources, the human capital in terms of construction staff, construction employees, but also people in planning at local and national levels. And buy-in of local communities is absolutely key, because you may have a right to housing on your statute books, and that's okay, that's one thing, it's a foundation. But unless you can actually realise that in terms of having the kind of all of the resources mobilised and working together to provide for housing, whether that's social housing, affordable rental, or indeed owner-occupied housing, then that right to housing will always be just an aspiration rather than a reality.
Okay. Very good, thank you. And the organisation you currently lead, Threshold, aims to secure this right to housing in Ireland. Recent figures suggest that almost 10,000 people in Ireland are in emergency accommodation. Is this an issue that would be solved by applying to the right to affordable housing at a constitutional level?
Well, clearly it's appalling that there's 10,000 people. That's families and individual people who whose lives are in hold. Their lives are kind of warehoused because they're in B&Bs, they're in hotels. They're not sure when they're going to be able to get on with their lives in a home of their own. And while we're very kind of exercised, most of us, about the plight facing those families and those individuals, a right to housing won't be on its own enough.
Okay.
What you need is political will that stands the test of time, not just for one ministerial period or one election cycle, but for a generation. And I guess for a generation we've had a deliberate disinvestment from the likes of social housing since the 1980s. Successive governments of all political hues have deliberately said, we're going to build and fund less social housing, and we're going to let the market decide, and landlords can come in and provide that housing. And that was fine during, say, the recession to some extent, where rents were low. It's a very different story right now, where rents are high, where availability of housing, rented housing, either in the social housing side of things or in the private rented side of things, is low. And you've huge demand. And where that happens, it's the people with the higher incomes that are able to command the higher rents, they're able to afford those. So what we need is all of the systems working together. We need sustained political will, both nationally and locally. We need that political will to translate into resources and budgets that enable housing to be built, social housing, and say affordable rental models as well in the private rented sector. And we need a planning system that's responsive enough to enable local authorities and private developers to work together to build sustainable communities. And we need local communities themselves to be receptive to development, appropriate development, and mixed development. That means that social housing can be built alongside owner-occupied housing, that services can go in alongside the housing, so that we have mixed communities that work for everyone.
And is that something you find that there is opposition from people living, they don't want the social housing into them next?
I guess all these moving parts have to work together in a complementary way, and you might have enough financial resources, but if you're getting huge opposition at the local level to certain developments being built, then that can slow down the planning process. You may have housing that's required, that's badly needed by families, by individuals, halted or stopped completely because of local opposition. And look, local communities have a right to object, and object on very, very justified grounds in a lot of cases. Maybe where developments haven't been planned properly, or there's overdevelopment in a particular area that will have huge challenges for the services in that area. But if we can see, I guess, more tolerance and acceptance at local level for the need for housing in mixed communities and the delivery of housing, that will help a good deal in delivering the kind of communities that we need.
Okay. Brilliant. And we heard there from Tony Murphy, a formerly homeless man who has since been rehoused. Recent figures show almost 80,000 households are on waiting lists across the country. Would social housing waiting lists become a thing of the past if the right to housing is secured?
Again, it's a a useful foundation, but on its own, it won't guarantee anything. And I guess what you need are those various resources, the financial, the planning, and will in communities, politically, and organisations like ourselves, charities and non-governmental organisations working with government. For example, we ourselves work mostly with private rented tenants. And what we need to see alongside social housing delivery is further reform and enhancements in terms of the Residential Tenancies Act, so the legislation side of things, but also policies that protect tenants, that enable tenants to afford their rent, for example, and that give tenants what we would call security of tenure, or the ability for a family, for an individual, to be able to stay in their home for much longer periods than many tenants
It's a long-term solution rather than just very short-term kind of fix.
Absolutely. So you need social housing solutions, but you also need rented solutions. Laws are important, but also policies and budgets to underpin those laws are absolutely crucial. And I guess charities like ourselves, working alongside government, working alongside the private sector, to ensure that we can build and grow the kind of communities that are required, that meet the demand for future generations, older people, families, the increasing number of people living on their own.
Okay, and you mentioned briefly there just about the resources needed. Do you think it is financially achievable for this issue to be solved in Ireland?
I guess the finances come down to political will. If you design your tax system and your spending regime to reflect certain priorities, then you can prioritise social housing and you can ensure that over time that you deliver social housing. Unfortunately, my experience suggests that it's very, very difficult to try and guarantee the delivery of the kind of supply that we need, either in social housing or in providing affordable rent. And that's the challenge that the current government face and subsequent governments face in the coming years in order to meet the demand for housing, both in terms of owner occupation, affordable rental and social housing. That requires resources, so it requires a certain tax regime and spending regime and an openness by government to invest in housing, not just now, not just in 5 years, but in 10, 20, 30 years to meet that increasing need of our population.
Okay. Well, John Mark, thanks again for coming in to us today.
Thank you.
So while we've heard from the many people involved in tackling the issue of homelessness in Ireland, next up we had some members of our team who braved the elements to spend the night sleeping rough to experience homelessness firsthand. Before we speak to them, let's take a look at how their night went.
Right, so I'm Shane Campbell.
I'm Joseph Fuller.
And tonight we're going to experiment here by sleeping rough. It's 9 o'clock. We're going to be out here till the morning. It's fairly wet, so we're going to see how it goes and see what it's like to spend the night in the streets.
Obviously, I'm now starting to feel the hardness of the ground, and obviously people keep walking by, lots of noise keeps you up awake at night.
I'm freezing, absolutely freezing, to be honest. It just became colder. I was painting lying on this and I'm really tired, and I'm probably not going to be able to sleep because people are just walking by. I don't know how anyone would do it on their own, to be honest. Having Joe here is like, it's just that little bit of extra like safety blanket, if you get me, knowing you have someone here. But if you're on your own, like, I don't know, you'd have no one to watch your back, I suppose. It's a bit frightening. How are you feeling, Joe?
Disorientated, weak, cold. Morely just weak though. The feeling you get when you're not getting enough sleep is feeling through your whole body. Start to feel a bit hungry.
It's just frustrating. Yeah.
just can't sleep. I don't know how people sleep like this. It's about a little bit after 6 o'clock. It's absolutely freezing. Yeah, I'm absolutely perished. I will never want to do that again. So we're done now. It's just past 7:15 there, and we are finished and freezing and cannot wait to get in my bed. I can't imagine having to do that on a daily basis or nightly basis. That would just be horrific. Just can't wait to go home and get heat.
We are glad we survived the terrifying ordeal of sleeping in this cold street, Toller Street that is, here in Carlow. As it is a very cold morning, it's a lot colder than it is now than it was during the night. And I have a really big headache, and I'm just looking forward to going back home, just hitting the hay, same for Shane.
Yeah.
But damn it, was it worth it? I'm glad to be still alive.
Right.
Two brave souls there, and I'm joined by them both in the studio now. Shane and Joe, I imagine that's a night that will stay with you for a very long time.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
Unforgettable experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we slept rough. Like, it was a horrible night, but it was 10 hours. Like, we were looking at it like, if you had to get up that morning, like we got to go home to our bed at 7:30, and get in bed and get in the heat. But someone had to stroll the streets then for another, 12 hours there to get back to the time we started at.
Yeah.
So I can imagine like that part is awful. Like, and you'd have more people. You wouldn't be able to lie in against shops, and like that's where we were against the shop. So yeah, it wasn't nice, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was the weather conditions as well. I mean, it was also wet that day, wet ground. I mean, even though you were under, the shelter of a canopy, there still was very cold. And as it got colder, you start, burning more energy in your body. You start getting more and more hungry. And some people ignore you. Some people like to try and help out. But it can be scary as well, because you have to put all the sights and sounds everywhere as well. Which,
of course, yeah.
And I think as well, Laura, we didn't have to deal with hunger greatly. Like, we went out there at 9 o'clock. But if you were out there constantly, like, I can't imagine how bad it would be, like, with the cold and hunger. Like,
exactly,
it's just unthinkable.
it would destroy you on the inside as much as on the outside.
Yeah.
And what were your lasting impressions from the night?
Just horrible. Yeah, really was.
I think, more people need to be more aware about, these people who are, lying homeless in the street, giving a helping hand now and again. It's the miracle of mankind.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks very much, lads. And that brings us to our next guest. As Shane heads back to the gallery and Joseph hops back onto his camera, we've got a very special interview with Brother Kevin Crowley of the Capuchin monks in Dublin, who has spent almost 40 years feeding and housing the homeless. Here's what he had to say.
In 1969, we started a centre for the purpose of helping people who left at hostels in the morning time. And when we started, we had about 50 people coming to the centre. And now each morning in 2018, we open our doors between 6:30 and 7. And we'd have anything from 250 maybe to 300 people for breakfast. And then at 1 o'clock, we open again for lunch. And we'd have anything from 450, 500, maybe 600, and some days maybe even more for dinner. That's 6 days a week. Then on a Wednesday morning, we give out food parcels. On up to about 4 years ago, we had about 400 people coming for food parcels. But now on a Wednesday morning, we'd have anything from 1,600 to 1,700. And then on a Monday, we give out baby food and baby nappies to mothers and little babies. And we'd have anything from maybe 200 to 250 for that. That's every Monday morning. St. Francis is the founder of our order, and it's in the spirit of St. Francis that we started this centre, because Francis, being the lover of the poor and had great admiration and great concern. And it's for that reason too, we don't ask any questions, because we feel it's difficult enough for people to be coming to a place like ours without putting all sorts of questions to them. And our main concern really is for the dignity and for the respect of every person coming to the centre, no matter who they are. And it's so that if Francis was here today, he would be doing exactly the same as what we are doing, and possibly maybe more, and maybe he'd be encouraging us to do more. But I suppose, as it is, we are doing quite a lot. For instance, our running costs will be 3.3 million, and of that we get 450,000 from the government. And again, our main income really is from voluntary donations. We're not a full fundraising, because I don't believe in paying for that. I believe that every halfpenny that comes into the centre goes directly to the people in need, and that's our main concern. We have a doctor 3 days a week. We have a full-time nurse. We have an optician twice a week. We have a chiropodist twice a week. We have a dentist twice a week. And then every morning we'd have about 30 to 40 first showers. And all these, they're all free. There is no charge whatsoever for any of our services. But again, our main concern is to make sure that everybody is treated with great dignity and great respect. The main reason why I opened the day centre, when I saw the people walking the streets and had nowhere to go, they were being turned out of churches because they were coming in to get warmed. And then as well as that, I saw them going along the streets looking into dustbins and taking food from dustbins. And I felt, we being in the followers of St. Francis, I felt that there's something that should be done about it. And that's the reason why we started. And it's terribly important that we're there to make sure that these people are fed and that nobody should go hungry. Our main motto is that no one should die without food. And our main motto is that we don't want to see anybody dying on the streets, even though so many people have died on the streets because of a lack of accommodation. And again, it's so important that people are getting housed and getting proper accommodation. My main concern is for the little children that come in here. We have a certain amount of children who come in here every day, and those children with their parents have to go back to a hotel room without food. And the only food they get is what we give them here. So again, it's so sad to think that little children going to a hotel without food and again, without any proper accommodation. So again, I suppose one of my big concerns is I'm constantly fighting with the government to get people completely and utterly free of hotels and get them into proper accommodation. We get 450,000 from the government and a running cost of 3.6 million. And the remainder of the donations come from the generosity of people and people who do various activities for us, to fundraise for us. But I'm firmly strong, I will not pay for fundraising. And I had no idea that it would grow this big at all, because as I said from the very beginning, we started with about 50 people coming in. And it has grown, and thank God that we are here for to help these people. So many people that come here for many years, so many have died, so many people have died on the streets because it was their decision to stay on the streets. They prefer to be on the streets rather than to take shelter. One particular man, he was coming in here for years. We got him a bed. We used to take him to that hostel every night. And at around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, he'd get out of the bed and he would lie down there on the streets. He actually died on the streets, quite close to the centre here. That was his choice. We had another man, he was coming in here, practice since the centre started. And he died last, just before Christmas. Again, it was his choice. He used to drink about, I think it was around 20 to 30 cans of the cheapest beer he could possibly get every day. And then, of course, he got cancer of the liver, and that's what really killed him. But in the end, he had a lovely death. He died in the hospice out in Arles Cross. And as well as that, he had friends with him when he died, and everything worked out very well for him in the end. We have had a few success stories, but very few. But those that did make a go of it, they did extremely well. The biggest problem that we have here with the people coming in, when we started first, it was drink. The alcohol was a big problem, but now the drugs are a huge problem. And so many people have overdosed here in our centre, and we would have deaths here on the centre only for the expertise in our medical team who saved them from dying here on our premises. I remember on one occasion a mother came in with a little baby, and the baby was only about maybe 6 weeks old, and she herself was completely out on drugs, and she was putting food back on that little child. So that we had to get the child taken away from that mother and put it into care, and about 2 weeks later the mother of that child was found dead on the streets with a needle stuck in her hand. So these are the people that we are helping, and so these are the people that we will continue to help until such time that the government will wake up and give proper medical supervision and medical care for the people in need. Well, I'm hoping at some day, and I won't see it in my time, that we won't have any homeless people, that we won't have any people lying on the streets, and that would everybody be equal, that everybody would be cherished with the great same respect, and everybody should have a home of their own with dignity and respect. My advice to anybody who wants to help the homeless is first of all to make contact with the organisations who are helping homeless people, and to maybe get involved in that way. But again, it can be a difficult and maybe an unpleasant work at times, but it's always very, very rewarding, and it's great to see people being generous in giving their time to help the people in need.
Brother Kevin Crowley, a wonderful man. That's all we have time for tonight. Please consider that the man or woman you pass on the street is a person with a story, a past and a future, just like you. Join us next week when we take an in-depth look in the upcoming Repeal the 8th referendum. Good night.